top 5 favorite Stephen King books with a bonus book at the end. Book number 5 is Misery. I read this book in high school, and let me tell you, it's one of the books that opened me up to Stephen King and his writing. Now, this is a book about an author, so it is a book within a book, which is a common thing for Stephen King. So if you're not really into that, you might not like Misery as much, but if you do read it, I highly suggest that you watch the movie with Kathy Bates. Book number 4 is Needful Things. This is a story about an individual that brings a curiosity shop to a small town, and he uses the items inside the shop to stir up the town. And let me tell you, wild things happen. Like, it's crazy. I highly recommend this book. It was such a fun read, but if you are going to read it, I would suggest that you make notes on the characters because there's quite a few of them. Book number 3 is The Outsider. There's nothing like a book about a detective trying to solve a crime. I always eat those up. I had some mixed feelings about the ending. I'm sure some people will love it. I'm sure some people will hate it. There is like a paranormal aspect to it. It does get a little weird at the end, but honestly, overall, I think he did a really good job wrapping it up. But the overall story of like 70% of this book is so worth the read. Book number 2 is on my list of favorite books of all time. Rose Madder is a masterpiece. This is literally a story about a battered woman who escapes her awful husband, and he is on the look for her. This book, about halfway through, definitely Stephen King has to sprinkle his mystic magic on it, and honestly, this book could have done without it. I love the beginning, love the middle, love the end, but it could have just been a story about a battered woman. And my favorite Stephen King book, which is on my list of top 10 favorite books of all time, is Fairy Tale. I highly recommend that you read this book. If you want to dabble into any Stephen King, this is where you want to start. It's horror, but kind of on the down low. He kind of wraps it up a little bit. It's more on the fantasy side of things, so if you're a big fantasy lover, this would be an amazing book for you to start when entering the Stephen King world. I seriously could not put this book down, and all the pages leading up to the magical aspect of this book were still worth it. I was still hooked even from the very beginning. And a bonus book for all my Stephen King fans on writing. If you haven't read this already, I would highly suggest reading it. It is about him and his writing and how he writes and why he writes and all his like tips and tricks, as well as a story about him having an accident and his entire recovery process. It's actually quite an amazing story, and I was super impressed. I had no idea that any of this stuff had happened to him in real life. It is a phenomenal read.